Brent managed to get a court order for Loree to leave his house in 1999, but did not expect her to obey it. Therefore, he just packed his bags and left his house and went to live elsewhere away from Loree. He didn't care if he had to sleep in a trailer because he was so happy to have Gail back. Though Brent didn't believe in Jesus in December 1999, it all made sense to him what Gail told him. Yes, this Loree had to be a Vatican agent. She had even told him in 1993 that she was a Jesuit. He didn't know what a Jesuit was in 1993, but after reading Jack Chick's smokescreens, and after his experience with Loree, he knew now that they had to be behind the Nazi Holocaust, just like Jack Chick said. Only a brilliant organization with genius political sense could commit the atrocities of the Nazi Holocaust and manage to pin all the blame on the Germans. Only a brilliant organization could use drug rape to extort him into having the girlfriend from hell from 1992 until now. It seemed that he and Gail were up against an empire. Later in 2011, when Brent would accept Jesus Christ as his Savior, he would believe that it was Jesus who spoke to Gail in that still, small voice at 2 a.m. in Seattle and said, "Your enemy is the Roman Catholic Church." Though Brent didn't believe in God, he knew that when Gail told him that Loree was a Vatican agent, whose job was to sabotage his love for Gail, she was right. He came to the conclusion that Gail's own brilliance put it together. Either way, he had no doubt that Loree was a Vatican agent assigned to him to sabotage his love for Gail. And he wasn't playing the Paramount Studios girlfriend game anymore. At this point in his life, he had put some of his acting earnings from his years working for Paramount into annuities and other investments, and was able to live off of these. He wanted his money tied up, too, so that Loree could not go to town with his credit cards anymore. Loree had often stolen his credit cards and went on shopping sprees at the mall, buying tons of clothes or other things, and had reduced him from a millionaire to one who had an income like a physician, not like a Hollywood star. The world did not realize what a spendthrift Loree was with his money. Confronting her about it did no good. "Well, I am your wife, so I'm entitled to use your credit cards." It seemed that once she managed to plaster her photos next to his in the press and the internet, her next step was to steal his credit cards at every opportunity and spend all his money. The Brent Spiner fans often commented how Loree seemed to live at the mall spending money. If only they knew how she did it, by stealing Brent's credit cards. Therefore, Brent felt he had nothing to lose to kick Paramount in the rear about Loree, because if he kept Loree, he'd lose so much money because of her that it would be the same as not having his Paramount job anyways. Now that he felt he made Gail safer by letting the world know that he wanted Gail and not Loree, he finally felt free to kick the bitch out of his house. Possibly because Gail had taken Brent back, he thought. And because the Jesuits at Paramount were worried about bad press, they would allow Brent to kick out Loree from his house. But even if they would not, he'd had enough. But Brent had no power to stop the fake photos that Jesuits posted everywhere online and in the tabloids that made Brent and Loree appear to be a couple. Now that Brent had officially kicked Loree out of his house, the Jesuits flooded even more fake photos of Brent and Loree together, a form of damage control. He decided that because he had dared to rebel against Paramount, that his Hollywood career was finished. He began to make plans to go to medical school. Even if they don't destroy my acting career, he thought, which they will, because I'm not playing their game anymore, I'd like to study medicine to help Gail, because those Jesuits are always attacking her health. She needs a doctor for a husband. Brent had considered medicine for a career as a young man, and practically had a degree in pre-med studies. He would enroll in UCLA Medical School and graduate as a physician in 2006. When Gail asked Brent, January 30th, 2000, on her wiretapped phone to expose on the LA News that he had taken Loree McBride to court, the Jesuits crashed Alaska Airlines Flight 261 head first into the Pacific Ocean, right off the coast of Los Angeles on the next day, the day the news was to air. That day was January 31st, 2000. The horrific jet crash, head first into the Pacific, killed all on board. So it eclipsed any news coverage that Brent had taken Loree McBride to court for her crimes against Gail. Because this crash happened in Southern California, it would definitely eclipse any coverage of Brent's case against Loree McBride on LA News. Apparently, Brent tried to go public over his case against Loree, and the Jesuits decided to create a major news story to eclipse any coverage of Brent taking Loree McBride to court. Alaska 261 was a scheduled international passenger flight from Lic Gustavo Diaz Ordaz International Airport in Vallarta, Mexico to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport in Seattle, Washington, with an intermediate stop at San Francisco International Airport in San Francisco, California. Jesuits used their space-age technology to accomplish the crash, making it appear to be caused only by inadequate maintenance due to in-flight failure of the horizontal stabilizer trim system jack screw assembly's Acme nut threads. Because of the crash, Brent's story about taking Loree to court never made it to the front page of any paper in the western United States. And the Jesuits knew, because of their crash, that this story would go no further than California, where Brent and Loree lived, or Washington, where Gail lived at the time. Jesuits loved to crash jets, and this would not be their first attempt to use jet crashes to accomplish their purposes against the famous men who loved Gail. They would do it again on September 11, 2001, to deter Brent Spiner, and with the November 12, 2001 American Airlines Flight 587 crash in Queens, New York, to deter Vladimir Putin. Jesuits started setting wildfires all over the country, probably to make it appear that the fires Gail put out at the mobile home in South Carolina were just random incidents. All of a sudden, everything all over the country became contaminated. Gail knew it was the Jesuits, and she knew they were trying to frame their crimes on somebody else. By 2000, all December 1996 photos of Loree's cold, defiant stare, as a depressed Brent stared at her, vanished from public view, creating the illusion that in 1996, Brent had sexual heaven with the woman who made him want to kill himself. Those rare photos of him with her showing his disgust and her defiant, hard eyes disappeared. Around this time, the Jesuits decided to change her image from publicist to filmmaker. They created a movie called Real Doll and listed Loree as its producer. Oh my God, Brent thought in 2000. That woman a producer? Ha ha! He laughed so hard at the thought that his stomach hurt. The extent of her conversations with him were, "I want to suck your dick," or "Time to make love," while she pounced on him like an animal. But as crazy as he knew it to be, he also knew how brilliant Jesuits were with propaganda. Yeah, that woman will get credit for being a legitimate producer, while they'll make sure my brilliant Gail's writings will go nowhere. They have to turn Loree into a producer because too many know I'm in love with a brilliant writer. Some producer Loree wouldn't make. If any movie came from her that the audience wouldn't boo to death at the theaters, it would most certainly not be her work. Some Jesuit did all the work and gave her credit for it to boost her image, to make her believable as Brent's wife. The Jesuits just wanted to slap a more respectable title onto her than that of publicist, to give her credibility as Brent's wife. After all, Loree was competing with a brilliant writer, Gail. So, the Jesuits needed to beef up Loree's image, make her believable as the wife of Brent Spiner. At the same time, they would portray Gail to the world as a middle-aged, crazy woman that Brent would never desire. and ensure that Gail's writings would go nowhere. The world must never see any undoctored photos of Brent with Loree, or they'd know how nauseating he found her. The world must believe he found his drug rapist so irresistible he married her. So, of course, all the December 1996 photos of him staring at her with revulsion vanished. The Jesuit fabrications about his love life on the internet disgusted him, but at least Gail still loved him and understood his predicament. Jesuits upped their game and unleashed all hell against Gail as she started divorce proceedings against her husband so that she could be with Brent. In amazement, he saw this shy, devoted Christian housewife and mother transform into Catherine the Great and King David, though at that time he just saw a woman hold up against an empire that would have made a lesser woman insane. Though he had plunged from major star of a major television series in the 1990s to an actor lucky to land bit parts in the 21st century, he would not give up his love for Gail. Jesuits punished him for this, but hang all else, his love for her, he'd die for her. Gail, after a long and expensive divorce, defended Brent against Loree with some of the legal statements or forms that became part of her divorce legal paperwork. However, when she mailed her statements to her attorney, Brent received what she wrote, but her attorney received a Jesuit counterfeit version that made her appear crazy. When her divorce was final, she lost custody of her son. Jesuits arranged for her son to fail 6th grade 1999 to 2000 to ensure the dad would get custody because he was always out to sea and Gail spent the most time with her son. So though she fought for custody, she almost felt relieved that she lost it, because she felt so helpless trying to protect her son against the almighty Jesuit empire. Perhaps with his dad, Jesuits would lose interest in him and leave him alone. She knew they overwhelmed her son to discredit her as a possible wife for Brent. The divorce final on May 31, 2001, Gail waited for her Brent to come and claim her as his bride. In July 2001, Loree blew up her clone in a car. She wanted to show Brent that she would make good on her threat if he tried anything. She told him it was Gail at first, and then after he broke down about it, she laughed, and told him it was a clone of hers. Brent remembered that momentous day when he almost boarded a jet to meet Gail. Right before he boarded his jet to go to her, Jesuits crashed jets into the World Trade Center towers and the Pentagon. That day was September 11, 2001. His flight was canceled. While the World Trade Centers crumbled to their death, so did his hopes for a marriage to his Gail. Gail, in fury, raised her fist to heaven and screamed from her car in Florida, her new home. "I know you Jesuits want to kill me. Why don't you just kill me right now and get it over with so you'll quit killing everybody else?" On September 25, 2001, Gail decided she needed a president in her life and fell in love with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who happened to be Brent's favorite politician. Brent liked Vladimir Putin. He was always his favorite world leader. He figured maybe he would be able to go see Gail and satisfy her, since Brent wasn't able to. He didn't have a Loree McBride to contend with, but then, well, Ludmila happened. 9 months after Brent dared to claim his Gail, 9 months after September 11, 2001, the Jesuit press reported in June 2002 that Loree McBride gave birth to Brent's son. To ensure that Brent would never dare marry Gail, Loree impregnated herself with Brent's stolen semen. With the birth of Brent's son, Loree had recouped her losses, even though Gail reinstated Brent in December 1999, because Loree now could claim to be the mother of Brent's child. Gail didn't stand a chance in hell of marrying Brent Spiner. Loree laughed, "Ha ha ha! gloating in her victory against Brent and Gail.